Why life demands suffering. What Schopenhauer knew that we're afraid to admit. You know what nobody wants to hear? That your suffering isn't a bug in the system. It's the system itself. Think about it. Every self-help book, every motivational speaker, every wellness influencer, they're all selling you the same promise, that happiness is just around the corner. One more purchase, one more achievement, one more life hack away. But what if I told you that one of history's most brilliant philosophers spent his entire life proving that this promise is not just false, but fundamentally impossible? Arthur Schopenhauer looked at human existence and saw something we're still desperately trying to unsee. And here's the thing, he wasn't being pessimistic, he was being honest. Let me show you what I mean. Picture two people at a coffee shop. Sarah's scrolling through social media, watching everyone's highlight reels, feeling that familiar ache of inadequacy. She's convinced that everyone else has figured out the secret to happiness that she's somehow missing. Across from her sits Mike, who just got the promotion he's been chasing for 3 years. He thought this would be it, the moment everything clicked into place. But sitting there with his fancy new title, he just feels empty, already thinking about the next rung on the ladder. Sound familiar? Here's what both of them are experiencing. What Schopenhauer called the pendulum swing between suffering and boredom. And here's where it gets really uncomfortable. This isn't something you can optimize your way out of. You can't life hack your way past it. You can't manifest or affirm or gratitude journal your way to some permanent state of contentment, because according to Schopenhauer, wanting, desiring, suffering is baked into the very fabric of existence itself. It's not a problem to be solved. It's the nature of life. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds depressing as hell. Why would anyone want to hear this? But stay with me, because understanding this might be the most liberating thing you'll ever do. The will to life, the force that drives everything. Schopenhauer gave us a concept that's as profound as it is disturbing. The will. Not your will, not my will, but the will, capital W. This blind, relentless force that animates everything. It's the drive that makes a flower push through concrete, that makes animals fight to survive, that makes us get out of bed every morning even when we'd rather not. He wrote, "The will is the thing in itself, the inner content, the essence of the world." What does that mean for you? It means that deep underneath every logical thought, every rational decision, every carefully constructed identity you've built, there's this churning, demanding force that just wants. It wants to exist, to persist, to consume, to grow. It doesn't care about your happiness. It doesn't care about your mental health. It just wants. Think about the last time you wanted something, really wanted it. Maybe it was a relationship, a job, a possession. Remember how that desire felt? That restlessness, that incompleteness, that sense that you couldn't be okay until you got it? That's the will talking. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Getting what you want doesn't silence it. It just shifts to the next thing. Schopenhauer saw this everywhere. All willing springs from lack, from deficiency, and thus from suffering. You're not broken because you're never satisfied. You're experiencing the fundamental condition of being alive. The will ensures that satisfaction is always temporary. Always. Because if you were ever truly, permanently satisfied, you'd stop striving, you'd stop wanting. And the will can't have that. The mechanism. Why getting what you want never works. Let me show you exactly how this works. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. You want something. The wanting creates tension, discomfort, and suffering. You chase it, work for it, obsess over it. The pursuit itself is painful, the anxiety, the uncertainty, the effort required. Then, one of three things happens. Option 1, you don't get it. Obvious suffering, the disappointment, the sense of failure, the renewed feeling that something's missing from your life. Option 2, you get it. And here's where it gets interesting. For a brief moment, maybe hours, maybe days if you're lucky, there's relief, satisfaction. You did it. But then what? The glow fades. The new becomes familiar. The extraordinary becomes ordinary. And that voice starts up again. What's next? Schopenhauer nailed this. No attained object of desire can give lasting satisfaction, but merely a fleeting gratification. It is like the alms thrown to the beggar, that keeps him alive today, that his misery may be prolonged till the morrow. Brutal, right? But look at your own life. How many things have you achieved or acquired that you thought would fundamentally change how you feel? And how long did that feeling last? Option 3. This is the one nobody talks about. You get it, and it's not what you thought it would be. The job isn't as fulfilling. The relationship doesn't complete you. The achievement feels hollow. This might be worse than not getting it at all, because now you can't even sustain the fantasy that getting it would have made you happy. But here's what nobody tells you. There's a fourth state, and it's just as miserable. When you're not actively pursuing anything, when you've achieved temporary satisfaction, when you have nothing to chase, boredom sets in. That restless, uncomfortable feeling that something's missing, that you're wasting your life, that you should be doing something. Thus, life swings like a pendulum to and fro between pain and boredom, Schopenhauer wrote, and you're on that pendulum right now, whether you realize it or not. What society doesn't want you to know. Now, here's where this gets really personal, because our entire economic system is built on not understanding this. Think about it. What would happen if everyone woke up tomorrow and genuinely accepted that acquiring more things, achieving more goals, and chasing more experiences won't bring lasting happiness? What would happen to consumer culture? To the productivity industry? To the entire machinery of capitalism that requires us to be perpetually dissatisfied so we keep buying, keep striving, keep producing? Society needs you to believe that happiness is achievable through external means. It needs you on that hedonic treadmill. Every advertisement is a promise. Buy this, achieve this, become this, and then you'll be okay. And here's the insidious part. They're not technically lying. You will feel better temporarily. That's enough to keep the system running. This is why Schopenhauer's philosophy is almost dangerous. Not because it's wrong, but because it's right in a way that threatens the fundamental operating system of modern life. Let me tell you something. The self-help industry, now worth over $10 billion, exists because of the gap between what we're promised and what's actually possible. It sells you tools and techniques and mindsets to achieve the happiness that Schopenhauer says is structurally impossible. And when those tools don't work, when you've done the affirmations and the visualizations and the goal setting and you still feel that fundamental dissatisfaction, what do they tell you? That you didn't do it right. That you need to buy another course, read another book, try another method. You're not failing at happiness. Happiness, as sold to you, is designed to fail. The shadow, what you're really afraid of. But let's go deeper, because there's something underneath all this that we need to talk about. You already know this, don't you? On some level, you've always suspected that the promise was empty. Every time you achieved something and felt that brief satisfaction dissolve into the next craving, part of you knew, but you pushed it down. You kept chasing. Because here's what you're really afraid of. If striving won't make you happy, if achieving won't make you happy, if getting what you want won't make you happy, then what's the point? This is the existential terror that keeps us on the treadmill. If we're not working towards something, if we're not improving, if we're not climbing towards some better version of ourselves, then what are we doing? Who are we? Your entire identity is probably wrapped up in your goals, your ambitions, your potential, the person you're becoming, the life you're building. Strip that away, and what's left? Schopenhauer forces us to confront this void, and it's terrifying. Because maybe your worth isn't tied to your productivity. Maybe your value isn't determined by your achievements. Maybe you don't exist to be useful, or successful, or optimized. Maybe you just are. And for a culture that measures human worth in terms of output and achievement and growth, that's heresy. Schopenhauer's life. The man who lived his philosophy. Here's something fascinating. Schopenhauer wasn't some miserable hermit hiding from life. He lived well. He enjoyed good food, opera, theater. He had a beloved poodle named Atman, which is Sanskrit for universal self, because of course it was. He maintained friendships. He engaged with the world. But he did it all without illusions. He didn't expect these pleasures to save him. He didn't think his next meal or his next concert would finally fill the void. He enjoyed them for what they were, temporary relief from suffering, not solutions to it. And here's what's really interesting. He found a kind of peace in this. Not happiness as we typically conceive it, but something else, something more stable. Because when you stop expecting life to deliver permanent satisfaction, you stop being disappointed by its failure to do so. He wrote late in his life, "Genuine happiness is not possible at all. The highest that man can attain is a heroic life." Notice, he didn't say a successful life, a productive life, an optimized life, a heroic life, one that faces the truth of existence head on. Schopenhauer also spent decades writing philosophy that the academic world initially ignored. His magnum opus, The World as Will and Representation, barely sold when first published. Did this crush him? Sure, temporarily. But he kept writing, kept thinking, kept developing his ideas not because he thought success would make him happy, but because the work itself was the only meaningful response to existence he could find. He understood something crucial. The will might be inescapable, but you can change your relationship to it. How to recognize this pattern in your life? Okay, so how do you know if you're caught in this cycle? Let me give you some signs. First, you find yourself constantly thinking, "I'll be happy when I get the promotion, when I lose the weight, when I find the relationship, when I make enough money." The goalpost is always moving, always in the future. Second, when you achieve something, there's a brief high, followed by a crash, or a feeling of, "Is that all there is?" You thought getting into that school, landing that job, buying that house would be more significant, but it just becomes your new normal, and the craving starts again. Third, you can't enjoy the present moment because you're always planning, optimizing, improving. Vacation isn't for relaxing. It's for capturing Instagram content and checking work emails. Dinner with friends isn't for connection. It's for networking or maintaining social capital. Fourth, you feel guilty when you're not being productive. Rest feels like failure. Boredom feels like a personal failing rather than just a state of being. You've internalized the idea that you should always be working towards something. Fifth, you judge your worth by external metrics. Your salary, your follower count, your achievements, your possessions. Because if happiness comes from getting things, then not having things means you're failing at life. Sound familiar? Yeah, me too. Because we're all on this hamster wheel together. What Schopenhauer offers, a way to live with the truth. So what do you actually do with this information? Because understanding that you're trapped on the pendulum between suffering and boredom isn't exactly a roadmap for living. Here's what Schopenhauer offered, and it's not what you'd expect. First, he said that aesthetic experience, art, music, literature, nature, offers temporary escape from the will. When you're truly absorbed in beauty, you stop wanting. You stop being that individual self with needs and desires. You just perceive. You become what he called the pure will-less subject of knowledge. Think about the last time you were completely absorbed in something beautiful. Maybe watching a sunset, listening to music, reading a novel. For those moments, you weren't thinking about your problems, your goals, your inadequacies. You just were. That's not an accident. That's a brief respite from the will. Second, and this is more controversial, he advocated for a kind of resignation. Not giving up, but accepting. Seeing through the illusions that society sells you. Recognizing desire for what it is. A biological and metaphysical imperative that will never be permanently satisfied. And in that recognition, finding a kind of freedom. The less the will is excited, the less we suffer, he wrote. Now, this doesn't mean becoming passive or checked out. It means engaging with life without the expectation that it owes you happiness. It means pursuing things because the pursuit itself has meaning, not because you think achievement will complete you. Third, and maybe most importantly, he pointed toward compassion. When you truly understand that everyone is suffering from this same existential condition, that we're all driven by the same blind will, all caught on the same pendulum, you stop judging people so harshly. You stop competing so viciously. Because we're all in the same boat. Compassion is the basis of morality, Schopenhauer wrote. Not because suffering is noble, but because it's universal. You're suffering. I'm suffering. We're all suffering. And recognizing this shared condition is the foundation of genuine connection. The real power move. Choosing your suffering. But here's where it gets really interesting. And this is something Schopenhauer understood that gets lost in the pessimist label people slap on him. You're going to suffer either way. That's not negotiable. The pendulum swings whether you want it to or not. But what you can choose is what you suffer for. Let me explain. If suffering is inevitable, if the will ensures you'll always be wanting, always be striving, always be somewhat dissatisfied, then the question becomes, what's worth suffering for? Chasing money you don't need, to buy things you don't want, to impress people you don't like? That's suffering for nothing. Pursuing goals because society told you that's what success looks like? That's suffering for someone else's values. But suffering to create something meaningful? Suffering to build genuine relationships? Suffering in the pursuit of understanding, knowledge, art? That suffering has dignity. Not because it brings happiness, it won't, but because the suffering itself is part of something larger than the endless cycle of want, get want. Schopenhauer himself suffered for his philosophy. He wrote in obscurity, was mocked by his academic contemporaries, lived to see his work largely ignored. But he kept writing because the work itself, the attempt to understand existence, was worth the suffering it entailed. You see the difference? The will is going to demand. You're going to want. You're going to suffer. But you get to choose the direction of that wanting. You get to choose what you're building with your suffering. This is the real liberation his philosophy offers. Not freedom from suffering, but freedom to choose your suffering consciously, rather than being driven by unconscious desires implanted by marketing, society, or the blind will itself. What becomes possible? So what changes when you really integrate this understanding? When you stop fighting the pendulum and start riding it consciously? First, you stop waiting for your life to start. You stop postponing your engagement with existence until some future condition is met. Because there is no condition that will make you permanently okay. So you might as well be here now, in whatever situation you're in, without the constant feeling that this is just a way station on the route to real happiness. Second, you stop being so easily manipulated. Every ad, every social media post, every productivity guru loses some of their power over you. Because they're selling the same lie, that external changes will bring internal peace, and you know better now. Third, you develop genuine compassion for yourself and others. When you mess up, when you fall short, when you feel that familiar dissatisfaction creeping in, you recognize it for what it is. Not personal failure, but the human condition, and that's strangely comforting. Fourth, you can actually enjoy things more, because you're not expecting them to save you. That meal, that sunset, that conversation, they're not auditions for permanent happiness. They're just what they are, and that's enough. Finally, you can engage with your ambitions and goals without being enslaved by them. You can work hard, pursue excellence, create and build, but from a different place. Not from lack and desperation, but from acceptance and choice. You start to understand what Schopenhauer meant when he talked about a heroic life. Not heroic in the sense of great achievements or recognition, but heroic in the sense of facing reality without flinching, living fully while understanding the conditions of life, finding meaning not in spite of suffering, but within it. The question you need to ask yourself. So here's what I want you to sit with. What if you stopped trying to escape suffering and instead asked what you want to suffer for? Because you're going to suffer either way. The will doesn't care about your vision boards or your 5-year plans. It's going to keep demanding. The pendulum is going to keep swinging. You're going to want things, achieve things, and still find yourself wanting more. But you can choose the arena. You can choose what you're building with that energy. You can stop fighting the fundamental nature of existence and start working with it. Schopenhauer spent his life trying to wake people up to this truth, not to make them miserable, but to free them from the exhausting delusion that happiness is just around the corner. That the next achievement, the next purchase, the next relationship will finally be the one that completes you. It won't. Nothing will. And there's a strange freedom in that. So what are you going to do with this information? Keep chasing the same tired promises? Keep believing that you're just one break away from permanent satisfaction? Or are you going to step off the hedonic treadmill and start living like someone who knows the truth? The choice, as always, is yours. But at least now you know what you're choosing between. If this hit you differently than the usual self-help platitudes, subscribe and drop a comment below. Tell me what you're going to choose to suffer for. And if you found value in this, share it with someone who's still on the treadmill, still chasing that elusive, permanent happiness. Sometimes, the most compassionate thing you can do is tell someone the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Because that's what Schopenhauer did for us. And whether we like it or not, he was right.